There comes a moment in every believer's life when the quiet weight of confusion settles on the chest like an unmoving stone. You look at the pieces of your story scattered across the floor and whisper into the silence, "God, why? Why did the door close just when you thought you were finally stepping into your season? Why did the relationship fall apart when you prayed so hard for restoration? Why did the opportunity slip through your fingers at the exact moment you believed you were ready?" It is in these places, the ones where your breath trembles and your faith flickers, that you begin to question not only the path, but the author of the path. And if you've ever found yourself wondering whether God made a mistake with the timing, with the pain, with the delay, or even with you, this message is for you. Because there is a truth that sits beneath every unanswered prayer, every confusing detour, every heartbreak, every divine interruption, and every moment of silence. God has never once made a mistake. Not in Scripture, not in history, not in your life, and not in the moment you are living right now. But I know how hard that is to believe when the evidence around you feels like the opposite. When the plan you thought God endorsed collapses, when the blessing you thought He promised gets delayed, when life wounds you in places you thought were protected. Today, you're going to see something, not just hear it, not just repeat it. You're going to see the fingerprints of God on situations you thought were failures. You're going to understand why certain things had to happen the way they did. And you are going to realize that what felt like a divine mistake was, in fact, a divine orchestration. Stay with this message. It may just be the turning point your heart has been crying for. There is a hidden pattern woven through every season of your life, a divine rhythm that does not always reveal itself in the moment, but becomes unmistakably clear when the light of God finally touches what you once called confusion. And perhaps the reason you are listening right now is because you are standing at the intersection of faith and frustration, where nothing seems to make sense and silence feels louder than any answer you've ever prayed for. You're trying to interpret a season that seems to contradict the promises you believed. You're trying to understand why a God who loves you would allow circumstances that cut so deeply. You're trying to reconcile the nature of God with the chaos around you. But before you can see the purpose, before you can understand the reason, before you can embrace the meaning behind the pain, you first have to confront a difficult truth. Your perspective is limited, but God's wisdom is limitless. Your understanding is momentary, but His plan stretches far beyond the horizon of your lifetime. You see the chapter, but He sees the book. You see the wound, but He sees the healing. You see what was lost, but He sees what is being prepared. And this is where so many believers quietly break. Not because God failed them, but because they misunderstood His silence. Not because God made a mistake, but because His timing did not match the expectation they created. This is where hearts grow weary. This is where doubts whisper. This is where the enemy tries to persuade you that you are forgotten, overlooked, or punished. But the truth, the deep and immovable truth, is this: God's silence is not abandonment, it is strategy. His delays are not denial, they are preparation. His redirections are not punishment, they are protection. What you are about to hear in this message will widen your perspective. It will help you trace the hidden threads of purpose in situations you once labeled as failures. It will help you reinterpret moments of pain through the lens of divine intention. It will reveal why certain relationships could not stay, why certain opportunities could not unfold, why certain doors had to shut, and why certain prayers were answered in ways that didn't match your expectations. And if you are someone who has been struggling lately with feeling distant from God, wondering why He has been unusually quiet in your life, then I want to gently point you toward a powerful resource that has helped many believers navigate that very season. In the pinned comment, you will find the devotional "When God is Silent." If you are longing to reconnect with God, to understand His silence, to regain clarity and spiritual direction, that devotional will walk with you, page by page, prayer by prayer, until your heart begins to hear Him again. Now, before we go deeper into this revelation, before the full picture begins to unfold, I want to invite you into a moment of spiritual engagement, not for the algorithms, not for the numbers, but as a declaration of faith. Before we continue, I want to invite you to engage with this message as an act of faith, not as a digital gesture. When you like this video, you're not just pressing a button, you are declaring, "Lord, open my eyes to your purpose." And when you share it, you're planting a seed into someone else's life who may be silently drowning in confusion. And when you comment, you are speaking life into your own season. So right now, if this message is stirring something in you, take a moment and write these words in the comments. God never makes mistakes. Let that be your declaration today. Let it rise above the doubt, the fear, and the confusion that has tried to silence your hope. And if you haven't yet, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a message that could realign your spirit at just the right time. Now, let's step into the story that will illuminate the truth you've been searching for. There is a story, part parable, part mirror, about a young man named Elias. His life looked like many of ours, full of hope, full of potential, full of dreams that seemed just close enough to touch. From a young age, Elias believed God had placed a specific calling on his life. He didn't know every detail, but he carried a sense of divine assignment. He believed he was meant to build, to lead, to create something that would outlast him. And so, he prayed, he prepared, he tried to walk faithfully. But life, as it often does, took him down a road he never wanted. For years, Elias worked tirelessly on a project he believed God had asked him to build, a community center that would restore dignity and opportunity to those forgotten by society. He poured every ounce of energy into it. He sacrificed relationships, comfort, and time. He drafted plans, he rallied volunteers, he hosted fundraisers, and he endured countless setbacks. But he kept going because he believed the vision came from God, and what comes from God must succeed. Yet when the project was finally ready for approval, after years of labor, the final funding collapsed. A single unexpected decision from a single board member shut down the entire operation. And just like that, everything Elias had built vanished overnight. He felt embarrassed, confused, and devastated. For nights, he sat awake asking the same question. God, if you gave me the vision, why would you let it fail? The years felt wasted. The effort felt pointless. The dream felt broken beyond repair. One evening, Elias walked to the edge of a quiet hill overlooking his city. It was a place he often went to pray, but this time he had no words. His heart felt bruised. His faith felt exhausted. And as he stared into the distant lights flickering in the darkness, he whispered, Lord, did I misunderstand you? Did I fail? Did you change your mind? But the heavens stayed quiet. Not angry quiet, not distant quiet, just quiet. Weeks turned into months. Life forced him to move on, even though his heart stayed stuck. Opportunities he once believed were connected to the vision disappeared. People who once stood by him drifted away. And slowly, Elias began to accept a painful conclusion. Perhaps God had made a mistake when he entrusted him with that dream. Or perhaps Elias had made a mistake in believing it. Yet God was working in places Elias could not see, in ways Elias could not imagine. One day, as he walked home from work, Elias took a different route than usual. It was nothing intentional, just a small, ordinary decision. But that small decision placed him directly in front of a small, neglected building with a faded sign that read, "Temporary shelter, closing soon." He felt something move in his spirit, subtle but unmistakable. It was the same stirring he had felt when God first gave him the original vision years ago. He stopped walking. He stood still, and the whisper he thought he would never hear again brushed across his heart. Look again. Confused, Elias stepped inside the shelter. What he found was heartbreaking. The place was falling apart. Supplies were almost gone. The few volunteers left looked exhausted. The director explained that due to lack of funding, the shelter would close within weeks, leaving dozens of vulnerable people without a safe place to sleep. As she spoke, something inside Elias awakened. It wasn't the original project. This was much smaller, much less glamorous, much less impressive, but it was real. It was immediate, and it needed him. For the first time in a long time, Elias prayed not for answers, but for direction. Lord, is this what you want me to see? And in the quiet of that old building, he felt the peace he had longed for. The kind of peace that doesn't explain everything, but assures you that you are standing in the center of God's will. Within days, Elias met with the director. He listened, he asked questions, and then, without fully understanding why, he volunteered to help. He thought he was offering small help, cleaning, organizing, fundraising a little, just enough to keep the place open for a while longer. But God had much bigger designs. As Elias stepped into this unexpected role, something began to unfold. People he had met years before, people who had supported his original project, started reaching out. Donors returned. Volunteers appeared. Resources began to flow, not in a flood, but in a steady stream that kept growing. And within a year, the shelter didn't just stay open, it expanded. The once forgotten building transformed into a thriving center of restoration, hope, and opportunity. It served far more people than his original community center ever would have. It became known across the city as a refuge, a place where dignity was restored and lives were rebuilt. One evening, after a long day of serving, Elias walked again to that same hill where he had once poured out his disappointment. This time, the city lights below looked different. Not because the city had changed, but because he had changed. And as he stood there, the whisper came again, stronger and more clear. I never made a mistake. I redirected you. Suddenly, everything made sense. God had not rejected the original vision. He had refined it. God had not wasted the years. He had prepared him. God had not closed a door to punish him. He had protected him from building something that would have crumbled under the weight of his inexperience. The failure he thought was final was actually God pulling him from a path that looked right, but wasn't aligned with his deeper purposes. The silence he thought was abandonment was actually God guiding him through timing he himself did not yet understand. The closed door he mourned was the very door God used to lead him to the people who needed him most. And without the pain, without the collapse, without the confusion, Elias never would have discovered the calling that truly belonged to him. That night, Elias lifted his eyes toward heaven, and with tears in them he whispered, "Thank you for not giving me what I thought I wanted. Thank you for the mistake I thought you made. That was never a mistake at all." And in that moment, Elias finally understood. Everything happens for a reason, not because life is random, but because God is sovereign. Not because everything is good, but because God uses everything for good. When we look at Elias's story through a spiritual lens, we begin to see a pattern that is echoed throughout Scripture. God's movements rarely make sense in the moment. They often contradict our expectations, interrupt our plans, and dismantle our timelines. But when you look closely, when you interpret your life not through emotion, but through revelation, you begin to realize something profound. God is incapable of error. His nature makes mistakes impossible. His character makes accidents impossible. His sovereignty makes randomness impossible. The Bible is filled with examples that mirror exactly what you've been wrestling with. Think of Joseph. God gave him a dream that he would one day lead and influence nations. Yet the first thing that happened was not promotion, but betrayal. Not elevation, but a pit. Not recognition, but slavery. Not justice, but imprisonment. If you paused Joseph's story at any of these points, you would think, surely, this is a mistake. But God was not behind schedule. He was building the man who could carry the dream. The pit taught him humility. The betrayal taught him forgiveness. The prison taught him leadership. And when the time was right, when the character matched the calling, the dream unfolded with unmatched precision. Scripture reveals that God's purpose often hides inside what feels like misalignment. Romans 8:28 declares, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God." Notice it does not say all things are good. It says they work together for good, meaning events that look confusing alone become purposeful when woven into the bigger picture. Another example is Moses. For 40 years, he lived in Pharaoh's palace. Then, for another 40 years, he lived in the wilderness. If you looked at his life at the halfway mark, you might believe God had wasted his potential. But the palace trained him in leadership, and the wilderness trained him in dependence. God was shaping two halves of one calling. There was no mistake. There was preparation. Now consider your own life through the same lens. Think about the setbacks you've endured, the relationships that ended, the opportunities that slipped away, the seasons where you felt stalled, hidden, delayed, or silenced. What if those weren't detours? What if they weren't failures? What if they weren't punishments? What if they were God positioning you for something you couldn't see yet? Sometimes God withholds what you want because it would have destroyed what you need. Sometimes he removes people because their presence would have corrupted your future. Sometimes he delays the promise because receiving it too early would have crushed you under its weight. From a psychological perspective, human beings naturally interpret life based on immediacy. We look at the moment, the feeling, the outcome in front of us. Our brains search for patterns that bring quick explanations. So when something painful happens, our minds instinctively label it as negative, wrong, or meaningless. We experience uncertainty as a threat. We experience confusion as danger. We experience loss as failure. But God does not operate within the limitations of human psychology. His view stretches beyond the now. His intentions are not emotional reactions. They are eternal strategies. This is why Proverbs 3:5 instructs us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." Your understanding is limited to what you see. God's understanding includes everything you cannot see. And when he allows something painful, when he interrupts, delays, redirects, or removes, it is never because he is confused. It is because he knows something you don't. There are doors you cried over that would have led to destruction. There are relationships you begged God to restore that would have derailed your purpose. There are seasons you wanted to stay in that would have kept you small. There are jobs you thought you needed that would have drained your soul. You call it loss, but God calls it rescue. You call it failure, but God calls it redirection. You call it disappointment, but God calls it alignment. And there is another truth Scripture reinforces: purpose is not revealed through comfort. Purpose is revealed through pressure. David was not discovered on the battlefield. He was discovered in the pasture. Ruth did not find her destiny in Moab. She found it through loss, displacement, and obedience. Paul did not become the writer of much of the New Testament by having an easy life. He discovered purpose through adversity. Pressure does not mean God is punishing you. Pressure often means God is preparing you. Even Jesus, the perfect Son of God, walked a path that made no sense to the people watching. His birth was humble. His ministry was unconventional. His crucifixion looked like a cosmic mistake. But what looked like defeat was the greatest victory heaven and earth had ever witnessed. So what does this mean for you today? It means the tears you've cried have not been wasted. The closed doors have not been accidents. The delays have not been divine neglect. The confusion has not been evidence that God is absent. It means your story is not off track. It means your life is not behind schedule. It means God is doing something that will only make sense when the pieces come together. And even now, even in the places that still hurt, even in the questions that feel unanswered, God is working quietly, strategically, faithfully. He is shaping what you cannot yet see. He is preparing what you will soon step into. And when the moment comes, you will stand like Elias, like Joseph, like Moses, like countless believers throughout history, and you will say, "What I thought was a mistake was God's perfect plan all along." Listen closely now, because what I'm about to speak over you is not theory, not philosophy, not general motivation. It is a word for your spirit in this exact moment. There are some things in your life that have felt shattered beyond recognition. There are seasons you thought were ruined. There are moments you replay in your mind, wishing you could understand why God allowed them. And heaven wants you to hear this. God has not mismanaged your life. Not a single chapter has fallen outside his sovereignty. Not a single tear has been unseen. Not a single battle has been wasted. You have been walking through a season that felt like divine silence, but the silence was not God stepping away. It was God working deeply beneath the surface, building something in you and around you that you were not yet ready to recognize. The areas where you felt abandoned are the very areas where God is about to show himself strong. The places where you felt overlooked are the places where God is preparing to lift you. The things you thought were taken from you are the things God is preparing to restore in better form, at the right time, with the right purpose. Hear this clearly. There is purpose behind the delay. There is purpose behind the disappointment. There is purpose behind the no, behind the not yet, behind the door that never opened. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are being aligned with a plan far greater than the one you imagined. God is reordering your steps so precisely that nothing from your past, even the painful parts, will be wasted. The very places where you felt disqualified are the places where God is about to show his glory. I speak over you now. Clarity is coming. Peace is coming. Restoration is coming. God is about to take what looked confusing and turn it into confirmation. He's about to take what looked like loss and transform it into launch. You will soon look back on this season and say with confidence, God never made a mistake. He was orchestrating my breakthrough. Your spirit is being strengthened. Your faith is being rebuilt. Your eyes are being opened. And the weight you've been carrying, the heaviness of not understanding, God is lifting it off you right now. He is reminding you that he is still guiding you, still guarding you, still shaping you. Nothing has been wasted. Everything is being woven. And the story God is writing in your life will reveal that every chapter, yes, even this one, had a divine purpose. Thank you for staying with this message until the very end. That alone shows a hunger for God, a desire to understand his ways, and a willingness to let him speak into the deepest places of your heart. If this word touched you, if it clarified something, if it lifted a weight you've been carrying, then I want to invite you to seal it with a declaration in the comments. Write these words: God never makes mistakes in my story. Let that be your stand of faith today. Let it echo against every doubt, every fear, every unanswered question. Declare it not as a cliche, but as a spiritual truth planted deep into the soil of your future. If this message brought you peace or revelation, I encourage you to take a moment and like this video, not for the channel, but as your way of saying, Lord, thank you for speaking to me. Your like becomes a light. Your comment becomes a testimony. And when you share this message with a friend, a family member, or someone walking through confusion, you become a vessel God uses to guide them back into clarity. Share it through your social media, through a message app, through a group chat. Send it to someone who needs to know that heaven has not made a mistake with their life. If you haven't already, Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the messages that speak directly into the places God is shaping you. And if you want to support this ministry in a deeper way, you can hype this video, become a channel member, or give through super thanks. Every act of support helps us continue producing messages that break chains, restore hope, and draw people back into the presence of God. And remember, in the pinned comment, you'll find the devotional, When God is Silent. If your heart has been craving direction or reassurance in the quiet seasons, that devotional will walk with you step by step until your spirit learns to hear God again. Before you go, carry this truth with you. Nothing in your life is random. Not the pain, not the delay, not the closed doors, not the detours. God is weaving purpose into every thread, and when the time is right, the picture will make sense. Until then, trust His hands, trust His timing, trust His heart. Keep walking with God.